If you're watching this after 2:17 a.m., pause the video. Not because of what you're about to hear, but because of what may already be happening around you. The last person who ignored that warning believed it was meaningless. They believed timestamps were coincidences. They believed warnings like this were written to provoke fear, not document events. When investigators entered their apartment 3 days later, nothing appeared disturbed. No forced entry, no signs of struggle, no message. Just a phone placed face down on the kitchen table. It was still recording. The file was exactly 11 seconds long. No voices, no movement, no background noise. And yet every analyst who reviewed it noted the same irregularity. The microphone was responding to something close, closer than the room itself. The recording began at 2:17 a.m. That time appears repeatedly in this case, across devices, across cities, across years. Not as a symbol, not as a myth, as a timestamp. Those who encountered it rarely noticed at first. They described a sensation rather than a sound, a subtle awareness that the silence around them had changed. Some adjusted their volume, others removed their headphones. A few checked their surroundings, convinced something had shifted behind them. Most dismissed it. The ones who didn't never spoke publicly again. This is not a story that announces itself. There are no dramatic warnings, no obvious signs that something is wrong. Only records, audio logs, disappearance reports, and a recurring moment in time that no one has been able to explain. If you are still listening after this point, understand something clearly. Every person connected to what you're about to hear believed they were only listening. None of them realized they were being heard. And whatever was recorded at 2:17 a.m. was never alone in the room. 3 names appear at the center of this record. They were not connected by location, profession, or social circle. They did not know each other. They never communicated directly. Yet within a span of 9 days, all 3 vanished. Evan Calder, Maya Liu, Jonah Reyes. Each of them searched for the same phrase. The searches did not occur on the same platform. Different devices, different networks, different times of day. But the wording was identical. Investigators recovered the search history from Evan's laptop first. The phrase appeared once, typed at 1:54 a.m., deleted minutes later. Maya searched it twice, according to archived server logs, once in a private browser window, once on a library terminal where activity was meant to expire automatically. Jonah's search was recovered from his phone carrier's metadata, a single query logged during a red light while his engine was running. None of the records display the phrase itself anymore. Where the text should be, there is an empty field. Within 72 hours of each search, the pattern repeated. First, silence, then withdrawal from communication, missed calls, unread messages, then disappearance. No bodies were recovered. No verified sightings followed. There is only one piece of recorded evidence linking all 3 cases, a single audio file. It does not carry a file name. It has no identifiable source. Its format shifts when copied, as if the data resists duplication. The recording lasts 11 seconds. Those who have heard it disagree on what it contains. Some report nothing at all. Others describe breathing. A few claim they heard a voice, though no 2 descriptions match. What is consistent is when it was accessed. Each of the 3 played the recording shortly after 2:17 a.m. Each of them was gone within 3 days. Why that phrase led them to the same file has never been explained. Why the 72-hour window repeats remains unresolved. And why only one recording exists, despite hundreds of references to it, has left investigators with more questions than conclusions. What is known is this: no one who searched for that phrase and listened beyond the third night ever left a second record. You have seen traces of this before. Not as a headline, not as a warning, as fragments. A screenshot shared without context, a short clip reposted, then removed, a comment thread that ends abruptly mid-sentence. At the time, it didn't register as important. It blended in to everything else you scroll past each day. Another odd post, another unfinished video, another file that wouldn't load properly. Most people move on without thinking twice. A few don't. If you're listening now, there's a chance you've already crossed that line without realizing it. Interaction doesn't always look like participation. Sometimes it's pausing longer than intended. Sometimes it's turning the volume up because you thought you heard something. Sometimes it's replaying a clip that didn't seem to play correctly the first time. That's how it began for Evan. That's how Maya first noticed the pattern. That's how Jonah encountered the recording without knowing what it was. None of them believed they were engaging with anything unusual. They believed they were observing. That assumption appears repeatedly in the case notes. Investigators later determined that none of the three downloaded the file intentionally. It appeared automatically, embedded in replies, cached in previews, loaded briefly before being replaced by something else. By the time they realized the file existed, it had already been accessed. You don't have to search for something to encounter it. You only have to remain long enough for it to finish. Several individuals interviewed during the investigation reported a similar moment of recognition. A pause, a sense that the silence they were hearing was different from the silence they expected. One described it as realizing a room wasn't empty without knowing why. Another said they became aware of their own breathing in response to something they couldn't hear clearly. These accounts were dismissed at first, until investigators noticed a shared detail. Each person who reported that sensation had interacted with related content, not directly, not intentionally, but repeatedly. They watched reposts, they read comments, they listened just long enough. The record does not suggest that attention alone is enough, but it raises a question that has never been answered. At what point does watching become listening? And if you've already listened once without knowing it, how would you recognize the moment it listens back? In 2016, there was nothing unusual about the place where this began. It was a mid-sized college town, the kind built around routine. Lecture halls during the day, quiet streets after midnight, students moving between dorm rooms, libraries, and late-night diners without thinking much about where they were going. Most nights sounded the same: phones buzzing, keyboards tapping, music leaking through thin walls. The file first appeared during one of those nights. It wasn't announced, it wasn't promoted, it didn't arrive with a warning. It was dropped into a group chat with no explanation. 11 seconds long, no title, no thumbnail. The caption read, "Wait until the end." At first, people treated it the way they treated everything else online, as a distraction, something to play once, react to, and forget. The clip contained nothing but silence, no static, no distortion, no identifiable sound. A few people joked that it was broken. Others assumed their phones hadn't loaded it properly. Someone reposted it to a forum thread labeled glitches. Another shared it privately, saying it felt unfinished. That was how Evan Calder encountered it. Evan was studying audio engineering at the university nearby. He spent most of his time working with sound in ways most people didn't think about. Waveforms, compression, frequencies that sat just below conscious awareness. To Evan, the file wasn't funny. It was clean. No background noise, no compression errors, no signs of editing. He downloaded it and opened it in his software, expecting to find something hidden. There was nothing there, just 11 seconds of flat waveform. Evan shared his findings back to the group chat. He said it was probably a joke, but added that the silence was unusual. Perfect silence doesn't happen accidentally. That comment went mostly ignored. Around the same time, Maya Liu noticed references to the same clip appearing on her forum. Maya moderated a true crime community focused on unresolved cases and digital artifacts. Members often shared strange files, lost voicemails, corrupted videos, audio pulled from old servers. The 11-second clip stood out because it didn't behave like corrupted data. It behaved like intention. Users described listening more than once, not because they heard something, but because they thought they were about to. One post described the silence as too complete. Another said it felt like the sound was delayed. Maya archived the thread, assuming interest would fade. It didn't. Jonah Reyes encountered the file during his overnight shifts. He drove for a rideshare company, mostly between midnight and dawn. The hours when the roads emptied and the city felt reduced to streetlights and reflections in glass. Someone sent him the clip while he was waiting at a red light. The caption read the same thing Evan had seen: "Wait until the end." He played it through his car speakers. Nothing happened. He laughed it off and forgot about it. At least that's what he told investigators later. Across the town, the file continued to move quietly. Shared as a joke, reposted as a curiosity, passed along with the assumption that there was something more. People kept listening because they believed they were missing the moment when something would finally happen. They expected a reveal, a sound, a voice, a trick. What none of them considered was the possibility that the end wasn't something you heard, but something that noticed you were still listening. The first warning signs did not arrive all at once. They surfaced quietly, scattered across comments, messages, and late-night posts that were easy to dismiss if you weren't looking for patterns. Someone mentioned a headache that started shortly after listening. Another described a pressure behind the eyes. A few said they felt tired in a way that sleep didn't fix. None of it seemed serious enough to report. The posts were written casually, almost apologetically, as if the writers expected to be told they were imagining things. One message stood out. It came from a user who claimed they replayed the clips several times, convinced there was something hidden in the silence. They wrote that during the third listen, they became aware of a sound that wasn't coming from their phone. They described it carefully, not loud, not sudden, close, as if someone was breathing near the microphone but not into it. Others began responding with similar experiences. One said they heard it only after removing their headphones. Another said the sound didn't appear until the clip ended. A recurring detail emerged. The breathing was always steady, never rushed, never irregular, and it always stopped when the listener moved or spoke. At first, these reports were buried beneath jokes and skepticism, but then came the messages warning people not to listen under certain conditions. The warnings did not originate from a single account. They appeared in different threads, written by different users across different platforms. They were phrased differently, but the meaning was consistent. Don't listen alone. don't replay it more than once, and above all, don't listen after 2:17 a.m. No explanation was offered. When questioned, those who posted the warnings either didn't respond or deleted their comments entirely. Moderators assumed the rules were part of an inside joke, but the timing drew attention. Several users noted that the most detailed accounts of discomfort were posted between 2 and 3 in the morning. One forum member attempted to compile the reports into a timeline. They stopped updating the thread after mentioning that the breathing sounded closer than it should be. The rules continued to circulate, detached from their original context. No one could trace who wrote them first. No archived post showed their initial appearance. They simply began existing. And the question investigators later struggled with was not whether the rules were effective, but how they appeared before anyone openly admitted something had gone wrong. Why that specific time mattered has never been established, only that everyone who ignored it described the same moment of realization. The silence didn't end. It shifted, and once it did, the listener was no longer sure they were the only one waiting for the sound to stop. Evan Calder was the first to disappear. By the time anyone realized something was wrong, the record had already begun to fracture into fragments, partial logs, recovered messages, timestamps without context. What remains comes from what he left behind. Evan did not panic when the reports started coming in. According to his classmates, he was curious, focused, methodical. He believed the clip could be explained through structure, compression artifacts, psychoacoustic effects, expectation bias. Silence, after all, isn't neutral. It carries weight depending on how long a listener waits. Evan began listening repeatedly, not casually, but deliberately. He isolated the file in his audio software, adjusted gain levels, ran spectral analysis. Nothing appeared. No hidden frequencies, no layered tracks, no anomalies that should have produced the reactions people were describing. That was when he began recording his own environment during playback. In a private message sent at 1:48 a.m., Evan explained his reasoning. He said if people were hearing something outside the clip, it might be a response to silence itself, the brain searching for input. He attached a short voice note to the message. In the recording, Evan speaks calmly. He describes his setup: headphones on, phone placed on his desk, microphone facing away from him. Halfway through the note, his voice slows. He pauses. Then he says something investigators later replayed dozens of times. There's something else here. It's not in the file. It's behind it. The message cuts off mid-sentence. That was the last time anyone heard Evan's voice directly. His phone was discovered 3 days later during a wellness check. It was lying on his desk exactly where he had described placing it. The screen was dark. The battery was nearly drained. The audio app was still open. A new audio file had been created at 2:17 a.m. The duration matched the original clip, 11 seconds. Audio analysts noted immediately that the microphone sensitivity had not changed. The environment was quiet, no footsteps, no doors, no movement. Yet the waveform showed activity, low level, rhythmic, breathing. Not Evan's. His breathing pattern had been captured earlier in the voice note for comparison. The new recording did not match it in pace or depth. More unsettling was the distance. The sound was not distorted the way distant noise usually is. It did not echo, it did not fade in or out. It was consistent, as if the source was close enough to be recorded clearly, but not close enough to be seen. No one could determine where Evan was when the recording was made. No location pings, no camera footage, no witnesses. Only 11 seconds of sound that did not belong to him.
Investigators asked a question they could not answer. If Evan wasn't the one breathing into the microphone, who was? And more importantly, why did the recording stop exactly when the breathing did?
After Evan Calder disappeared, the file stopped feeling like a curiosity. For Maya Liu, it became a record that needed to be preserved before it erased itself. Maya had seen online trends flare and vanish before. She had watched forums implode, links rot, and entire conversations disappear without warning. But this was different. The references weren't fading over time, they were being removed. Maya began by cataloging everything connected to the clip. Usernames, threads, timestamps, screenshots taken before posts vanished. That was when she noticed the first pattern. Every confirmed disappearance was preceded by a search. Not for the audio file itself, not for a title, for a phrase. At first, the differences seemed minor. A word substituted, a tense shifted. But the structure remained the same. Each phrase was written as a question. Each referenced sound. Each implied that listening was reciprocal. Maya attempted to reconstruct the original wording using cached data. The results were inconsistent. Pages that had existed hours earlier returned error messages. Search results displayed previews that no longer matched their content. Links redirected to unrelated material as if the original destination had been overwritten. She documented everything. At 2:03 a.m., she captured a cached fragment that referenced an audio file hosted on a public server. At 2:09 a.m., the same fragment led to a blank page. At 2:14 a.m., the link redirected to a generic error message. By 2:17 a.m., the entire thread was gone. Maya wasn't the only one to notice. Several forum users reported similar behavior across unrelated sites. Saved bookmarks opened to different content. Archived pages displayed altered text. In one case, a screenshot of a search result no longer matched the search query typed beneath it. It was as if the record itself was unstable. Maya attempted to search for the phrase directly. The search bar accepted the text. The results loaded, then changed. Pages appeared and vanished within seconds. Some displayed only partial sentences before refreshing into something else. None of the links worked twice. What frightened Maya wasn't the disappearance of information, it was the replacement. The empty spaces were being filled. She began to suspect that the phrase was not just a search term, but a trigger, something that pointed outward and something that pointed back. Maya saved everything locally, offline copies, encrypted drives. She left a note in her private research log. If the results keep changing, someone is watching the search. She stopped posting publicly after that. Within 72 hours of her final logged search, Maya Liu stopped responding to messages. Her accounts went inactive. No announcement was made. No explanation followed. Investigators later recovered her devices. Every saved file remained intact. Every external link she had documented led nowhere. The question that remains has never been answered. If the phrase itself was altering the record, who was making sure it couldn't be found again? And why did the changes always accelerate after someone tried to preserve it? Jonah Reyes did not believe in rules he couldn't verify. According to people who knew him, Jonah trusted what he could see, what he could hear clearly, and what could be explained afterward. He worked nights because the city made more sense to him when it was quiet. Less noise, fewer variables. He first heard about the warnings during a break between rides. Someone sent him a screenshot of a forum post listing 3 conditions. Don't listen alone. Don't replay it. Don't listen after 2:17 a.m. Jonah laughed and replied with a single message. It's just an audio clip. That exchange was timestamped at 1:58 a.m.
Jonah was driving when he played the file again. Dashcam footage shows the interior of his car illuminated by streetlights passing overhead. The road ahead is empty. No passengers, no radio playing. The audio clip begins. For several seconds, there is nothing. Then Jonah's posture changes. He straightens slightly in his seat. His eyes flick toward the rearview mirror. The camera captures him glancing into the back seat. There is no one there. At 2:16 a.m., a sound is recorded that does not register on the external microphones. A knock, not against the window, not against the door, from inside the car. Jonah slows down, signals, pulls to the side of the road. He speaks for the first time since the clip ended. "Hello?" There is no response. He opens the driver's side door and steps out. The camera continues recording. Streetlights hum. A car passes in the distance. Then the dashcam microphone captures something else. A whisper. Low. Close. It says his name. Not shouted. Not distorted. Spoken the way someone would say it if they were leaning towards him. Jonah turns sharply toward the sound. There is no one in frame. Investigators later isolated the audio. They compared the voice to every known passenger Jonah had picked up in the previous 6 months. Ride logs, customer recordings, voicemails. No match. The whisper does not carry the acoustic characteristics of an open environment. There is no echo, no reverberation. It sounds as if it was recorded inches from the microphone. Jonah steps fully out of the car. The door remains open. He looks around once more, then he moves out of frame. The camera continues recording for 11 seconds. Breathing is audible during that time. When the feed cuts, the engine is still running. The car was found the next morning in the same location. Fuel nearly depleted, doors locked. Jonah's phone was inside the vehicle. No outgoing calls, no messages sent after 2:17 a.m. What investigators could not explain was not the knock or even the voice. It was the familiarity. The whisper did not search for his attention. It did not ask who he was. It used his name as if it had always known it. And the question left unanswered by every report is the same one that appears again and again in the case files. If Jonah was alone in that car, who was close enough to speak to him quietly?
By the time Jonah Reyes disappeared, the reports could no longer be treated as isolated events. Investigators began reviewing every available account from individuals who admitted to ignoring the third rule. Not everyone vanished, but everyone who listened after 2:17 a.m. described the same sequence. The order never changed. First, breathing. Not sudden, not alarming at first, often mistaken for their own. Several witnesses reported holding their breath to confirm what they were hearing. In every case, the sound continued. Then came the footsteps, not loud enough to suggest movement across a room. Measured, slow, the sound of weight shifting close by. Witnesses disagreed on where the steps were coming from. Some believed they were behind them. Others said the sound moved without direction. What mattered was the distance, always near enough to suggest presence, never close enough to see. Then, silence. Not gradual, immediate, as if something had stopped listening. The duration of that silence was consistent across all reports. 11 seconds. Investigators timed the gap repeatedly, using different playback speeds and environments. The result did not change. 11 seconds passed before any other sound returned. In some cases, the witnesses spoke during that silence. Their voices did not interrupt it. In others, background noise continued. Air conditioners, traffic, clocks ticking. The silence remained intact, layered over everything else. It behaved less like an absence of sound and more like a boundary.
Several witnesses said that during those 11 seconds, they became aware of their surroundings in a way that was difficult to describe. Rooms felt larger, air felt heavier to move through, time felt uneven. One person wrote that it felt like waiting for someone to answer a question that had already been asked. No one could explain why the pattern ended when it did. Those who attempted to count the seconds often lost track before reaching the end. Those who used timers reported the same result: 11. Always 11. The consistency disturbed investigators more than the content of the reports. People lied about details. They exaggerated sensations. They disagreed on what they thought they heard, but they did not disagree on the sequence: breathing, footsteps, silence, 11 seconds. No theory has adequately explained why that duration repeats across unrelated individuals and environments. Some researchers suggested it could be linked to human perception, attention span, or memory thresholds. Others argued that explanation avoided the more troubling question: if the silence is measured, who is counting it? And if something decides when those 11 seconds end, what happens during the moment just before the sound returns?
The final recording was not found by searching for it. It surfaced during a routine audit of archived data. Old servers scheduled for deletion, their contents reviewed automatically before being wiped. Most of what they held was ordinary: outdated backups, corrupted files, fragments that no longer had an owner. Then one file failed to categorize. It had no name, no listed source, no clear format. The system flagged it because its timestamp conflicted with its metadata. The file was marked as created at 2:17 a.m. That alone would not have mattered if not for the device ID attached to it. The recording was linked to hardware that did not exist at the time the file was created, not discontinued, not upgraded, manufactured years later. At first, analysts assumed an error, data corruption, a misaligned clock, but the anomaly persisted across copies. Every time the file was moved, duplicated, or examined, the metadata remained unchanged. The recording itself was short, 11 seconds. Those who accessed it for the first time often believed nothing had played. The waveform showed activity, but the sound felt delayed. Breathing began halfway through, close, measured. Then a voice. It spoke clearly. "Can you hear me now?" The sentence was not distorted. It was not filtered. It did not sound recorded in a large space or a small one. It sounded immediate. Those reviewing the file noticed something else. The voice did not behave like a playback. It did not compress or flatten the way audio normally does when copied repeatedly. Its quality remained intact, regardless of format. Several analysts reported the same instinctive reaction. They leaned closer to their speakers, not because the sound was faint, but because it felt directed. When attempts were made to trace the origin of the file, the trail ended immediately. No upload logs, no access records prior to the archive. It appeared fully formed, as if it had always been there. The most troubling detail was discovered days later. The phrase spoken in the recording matched fragments recovered from earlier cases. Different voices, different decades, the same question: "Can you hear me now?" Investigators reviewed every known disappearance connected to the earlier recordings. They found no evidence that any of the missing individuals had recorded that phrase themselves. No matching voice prints, no similar speech patterns, which left only one conclusion they refused to document officially. The voice did not belong to anyone on record. And if the file was created before the device that held it, then whoever recorded it did not need the device to exist first. The question that remains unanswered is not how the file was stored, it's why it waited to be found, and why, once it was heard again, several analysts reported the same sensation that had followed every other case: the sense that the question was no longer coming from the speakers, but from somewhere close enough to hear the answer. Some people believe what you've just heard is only a pattern created by coincidence, that the recordings, the timing, the disappearances can be explained by how attention works under silence. Others believe the pattern exists independently, that it doesn't spread through sharing, but through recognition. Both explanations depend on the same thing: someone listening. If this was just a story to you, it will end here. If it wasn't, you may already be considering details that didn't seem important at first. The question isn't whether you believe it, it's whether you think the legend requires participation or simply waits for someone to notice. That distinction has divided every discussion connected to this case. You'll find both sides in the responses. Pay attention to which one makes more sense to you.